So just that is on right now. And if you can keep your audio and videos, your video off and your audio on mute, that's great. You will have the ability to ask questions through the chat feature. I think we're all familiar with that feature on the bottom of the Zoom platform here. So if you have any questions, please ask them in the chat, and we'll make sure we get them addressed as we're going over the course of the next hour. So without further ado, I'd love to jump in and give you a high-level introduction of our panelists and our moderator. And I would say that their accolades, both personally and professionally, are deep and wonderful accomplishments. So I would ask you, if you want to learn more about them, just to go on our website, and you'll be able to see a lot more detail on them. But our first panelist is Mark Hayes. Many of you who are familiar with Common Bonds are familiar with Mark, who's been a wonderful contributor of ours, and I think most recently was a great moderator for our critical race theory session that we had. Mark's an award-winning communications expert, and prior to launching his own communication firm, he spent nearly 3 decades bringing news viewers in major cities across the country their news and information of the day, and some of those stops were Dallas, Denver, Detroit, and Baltimore. He's a TEDx speaker, a Silver Telly Award winner, and has 2 Emmy nominations and highly coveted national recognition for spot news coverage from the National Press Photographers Association. He is now the president and CEO of his own media training and strategy company. Mark also last year launched an organization called Varsity Connects, which is really near and dear to the conversation we're going to have this evening. The goal of Varsity Connects is to help parents go from being stuck and frustrated with their communication with their student athletes to confident, well-connected parents, so they can enjoy their child's athletic pursuits in a family and watch them grow and develop into mature young adults. So it's wonderful that Mark is involved in that. He's been a passionate supporter of boys and girls clubs in every city he's been part of. He also has been a fervent supporter of drug abuse and recovery and prevention efforts with different organizations. He is a graduate of Howard University and has 2 children, 2 boys. So Mark, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. He's also a board member of Common Bonds, which I should have mentioned probably
indeed.
first.
Don't forget that part.
Yep. So really pleased as well to have Dr. Richard R. Shelton, otherwise known as Rick, joining us. Rick is a pediatrician for the Longstreet Clinic, which he's been doing since 1999 in Beaufort, Georgia. He is a native New Yorker who studied his undergraduate and got his medical degree from Washington University in St. Louis. His residency at Children's Hospital Medical Center. He's certified with the American Board of Pediatrics and has a number of professional affiliations, including the American Medical Association, a fellow for the American Academy of Pediatrics, the National Medical Association. He is the father of 2 boys as well. So Rick, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Matt Couloute, Esquire, has joined us as well. Matt is the principal and general counsel at Base Unlimited. He's a graduate of Clark University and New York NYU Law School. He's got a wonderful long background and experience in the legal arena. He's the assistant state attorney general in Connecticut. He was the player liaison and security specialist for the National Football League. He was staff counsel for the NFL. He was the VP and general counsel for the United Football League. Back in 2011, he founded his own firm and has done a lot of self-employed things since then. His areas of focus are sports entertainment, licensing, business consulting, and management. And Matt has 1 son and 1 daughter. So Matt, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And last and surely not least is our wonderful moderator, Angela Buttimer. Angela is a graduate as a master's from Georgia State University. She is a partner in the Atlanta Center for Mindfulness and Well-Being. She is a accomplished professional speaker, licensed psychotherapist, and a TV and media contributor. She specializes in mindfulness, mindful performance, mindful leadership, positive psychology, integrative health and wellness, and neuroscience. If you live in the Atlanta area, you probably recognize her and her husband very much. She is a TV and media contributor for Fox 5 Atlanta, and she also is the daily columnist for the Joyful Daily and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. She's a TEDx speaker, Georgia chapter past president of the National Speakers Association, and she is a member and contributor of the National Association of Contractors, Women Contractors. She also has 3 children, all boys. So without further ado, Angela, I will hand it over to you to start this wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much, Mike. And it's just an honor to be a part of this program tonight and to be partnered with Common Bonds and all of the good work that Common Bonds is doing out in the world. So thank you for having me tonight. So let's get started. And we're going to start with Mark. With a question, Mark. You and I, we have been working together for some years now. We collaborated on your TEDx talk, which was wonderful. And I believe Mike put that link in the chat. If you haven't seen it yet, you definitely don't want to miss it. You'll definitely want to listen to it after tonight's conversation. And Mark, I know that you've had some personal painful struggles around communication, even though you are a communication expert and you've been on TV for years, for 30 years. And so why was it so important for you to bring your personal experience and this messaging to the TEDx stage?
Yeah, just to give people who are not familiar a little bit of background, I have 2 boys, as Mike mentioned, and they're just amazing kids. We had high hopes and big dreams for both of them. And they're both smart, affable, good-looking young men. And we're on 2 very different tracks throughout their lives as I look back on it. My oldest is 34 now. Just a great kid. Won some accolades playing high school football, went on to play college football at Howard University, got his degree, ended up in the U.S. Navy, and now sits in a Georgia prison. My other son is an amazing young man as well. Just finished his professional hockey career, graduated from the University of Maine, which is kind of tantamount to playing football in the SEC, if you will. Hockey East is one of the best hockey conferences out there. And I was so proud of him for that accomplishment and his work ethic to get him through all that. But with my older son, I had to go back and figure out, as most parents would who have a child that ends up in prison, what did I do wrong? Right? Where did we go wrong? We gave him everything we needed. My wife is an attorney by trade, former prosecutor. Matter of fact, she was in the prosecutor in the city where our son committed his crime. And so I had to figure out what went wrong. And because I look back on it and I was like, wow, I wish I had this kid's childhood. I mean, I thought it was nice from where I stood. But when I really went back and looked at it, I realized that I wasn't communicating effectively. I spent more time talking at him than to him. I spent more time waiting to speak instead of listening and understanding what he was saying. And if I had listened and understood what was going on, I would have understood that he had been a gang member from high school all the way through college to the time he was incarcerated. And it was very difficult for me to accept that and continue to move forward. So I had to do something. I'll never forget the day we stood in the courtroom that he was sentenced. And, we begged the judge not to throw him away. We said he has redeeming value. We know if given a second chance, he will make good on the opportunity. So please don't throw our child away. And I never forgot that pain. So I wanted parents to understand how important it is, how vital it is to talk to their children, to talk to them and understand them. So that requires not just moving your lips, but also being an active listener, an active participant in the conversation. And the other critical part is understanding the outside influences in their life, right? Because you're supposed to be the strongest influence in their life. But if you opt out, somebody else will fill that void.
Yeah. And what are those outside influences that you see, Mark, as most powerful, most influential, and even most dangerous?
Right. Well, what I see from my research right now that's most dangerous is obviously social media and the media that we consume. And it's everywhere. The kids can't get away from it. They don't put their phone down, so it follows them everywhere. So as parents, we have to understand, 20 years ago, we really can't relate to being bullied on our phone, right? We can't really relate to FOMO, and especially older parents like me, in the 80s, we didn't have cell phones. We had the cord that we had to pull into the bedroom from our parents' room, right? If we wanted to talk on the phone
Right.
late at night, right? So, these kids are constantly on their phones. And those influences are frightening. We've seen horrific cases around the country of people being bullied into suicide. And, it for young ladies, we see self-image issues all stemming from social media, Instagram. We know what these platforms are doing to our children's self-esteem. And then we have parents that are very busy and disconnected from what their children are going through, right? And if you don't take the time to understand what's bothering them, how can you support them, right? If you don't know what's going on, how can you provide the support that they need? But social media, friend groups, music is still a volatile influencer for these kids. If you just listen to some of the lyrics, and you'll hear some really harsh and demeaning even kinds of songs and lyrics that are out there in the mainstream. This is not stuff that you have to, look hard to find. It's right there at your fingertips if you're, 15, 16, 17.
Mm, absolutely. Yeah, social media is everywhere, and it's a different day now in terms of parenting. And Mark, your story is heartbreaking and it is extreme. And your family has suffered some serious ramifications from that. But some parents may not be at that extreme. Some families may not go that distance. What are some lesser ramifications that you see that are happening within families when parents are not communicating effectively with their kids?
Yeah, well, the obvious one I think that we could state is drug abuse,
Okay.
right? And alcohol abuse.
Mhm.
Those are two things that are very common right now for young people. Remember, I mean, we all experimented with it, right? But the drugs now, you have no idea what's in them. The opioid crisis. I worked in Cincinnati as my last stop in television news. The opioid crisis there was horrendous. I mean, the young people that were dying, adults that were dying from it. And now that we have fentanyl in the mix, it's you really are playing Russian roulette when you're experiencing with drugs right now. So drugs and alcohol are really critical, but just depression, even dealing, and I don't say just depression lightly. Kids get depressed. I dealt with it with my younger son when our oldest was going through, his sentencing phase, and he blamed himself. And he was up in Maine. I don't know if you've ever been to Maine in the winter, up in the Bangor area, but it's gray, it's dark, it's snowy. And you're sitting there. At the time, he happened to have an injury that he was recovering from in a surgery. So he was alone, spending a lot of time by himself, and he became very depressed. And we had to get him some mental health services because of the trickle down effect that was going on with us. So you have depression, alcohol, bullying, self-image, self-esteem, so many of these things. It might just be that you don't have the latest pair of sneakers,
That's right.
and people are teasing you. They still play the dozens, right? And still make fun of kids. And now it's even worse because it's magnified on social media.
Mhm.
And people can continue it on social media, and the victim, the person being bullied, can't get away from it,
So
right?
true, Mark. Yes. And kids are walking around as adults are with this trance of unworthiness because social media presents an illusion that's not real. and then you feel like you're missing out or that you're lesser than. And I just want to say to you, as a licensed psychotherapist, I applaud you so much for getting your son mental health services, because that's a missing link that I see between parents and children, is that parents normalize what's happening with their kids and they don't get them the mental health support or other kinds of support that they need.
Right. And when we talk about marginalized communities too, it's important that we remember, Black and brown communities may not have access to these resources,
Mhm.
right? So they don't know what to do and don't know who to go to. And then when you think about the cultural significance, in the African-American community, for whatever reason, a lot of people think, I shouldn't need mental health services. I'm not crazy. Right. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. Just help understanding and processing the emotions that you're dealing with
Yeah.
is reason enough to go and get someone to help you sort it out.
Yeah.
And culturally, we have to remember that we all communicate differently.
Yep.
Right. And that's why you can't be dismissive when it comes to a child's needs, and especially a child's need for support. And
Absolutely.
that communication will open doors for you, right? Once they realize how much you care, then they'll want to share your experiences and be willing to listen to what you're saying.
Yes, yes. We have seen in the psychotherapy world a steep incline with our kids all the way up to age 28 in stress, anxiety, depression, and suicidality, unfortunately. And I'm just wondering, Dr. Shelton, what you're seeing in your medical practice. You've been a pediatrician for 30 years. What are you observing between the parent and child communication, and any differences in different communities that you're seeing?
Yes, thank you, Angela. To piggyback on what Mark said, there are differences. Obviously social media has had a huge impact. When I first started practicing, there was no social media. Cell phones and things were really just not even that prevalent. But the pressures on children these days are, as you said, Angela, are incredible. They can't get away from it. We used to, when there was a problem when we went to school, you went to home on Friday and you had all weekend to recover from it. That's not the case anymore. Now it's constant. It's 24 hours a day, and depression is real. In our youngest kids, who you wouldn't even think could be depressed. Can a 6-year-old be depressed? Yes, we see 6-year-olds taking their own lives on television and on social media, which is incredible. We have to do depression screens, down to 8, 9, 7 years old sometimes, when we start to see certain things.
Wow.
So, and we see that in all communities. My practice spans Black, brown, white communities, Asian. We have a good mix of a very diverse community here in the Atlanta area. So I do see how they affect different cultures differently.
Okay.
I will say the biggest thing that Mark said, and it's incredibly important, is listening. Listening and communication actually starts when they can first talk. So when children are 3 and 4 years old, yeah, they're going to say a lot of nonsense that you probably really aren't interested in, but that's when they are starting to build that communication relationship with you. And if you don't pay attention to them then, they will not talk to you when they get older, when they are having those issues and they are having those problems. They won't feel like you're going to listen because you didn't listen to them when they were younger. Why all of a sudden are you going to start listening to them now? And that's the biggest thing. And it is, I do see more in Hispanic cultures that are, and even in the Black community, I see are a little less tolerant of different sexual orientations. And that's where we see a lot of the communication issues and a lot of problems: depression, suicide, anxiety, all those things that we used to think were only adult issues are no longer adult issues. And so I do see some differences in different communities.
Mhm. And Dr. Shelton, as Mike mentioned, you are a parent of 2 boys. How has that gone for you personally, with your relationship with them and communication with them, and maybe mistakes you've made that we can learn from, and any lessons learned along the way?
Sure. Not that you have to be a parent to be a to be a good pediatrician, but it sure doesn't hurt. Because a lot of the mistakes that I've made with my own kids, I try to help people not make with their own. So yeah, I have two boys. I have a 23-year-old and a 19-year-old, very different personalities. Um, the mistake I made with my older one, I'm sorry, is I don't think as Mark said, I don't think I really really listened to him until he has ADD. And I remember when he was back in second grade and he was getting in trouble for speaking out and not waiting his turn and getting up out of seat and all those kind of things. And we were more on him on it. You got to behave. You got to behave. And then until the one day he came to me, and the first time I really heard him, truly heard him, well, he said, "Dad, I'm trying. I'm really trying, Dad." And that hurt because I realized then that I had not been listening to him. I was talking at him. I was disciplining him. I was expecting more from him. And he really was trying, but I didn't see that. And my younger one, I didn't make that mistake. My younger one, very different personalities. He's, as Mark knows, Mark's his godfather, both of my boys. And he's a talker. And I learned early from other parents who were older than me that had older children, to listen, even when he was talking stuff that I didn't even had no reason to care about it, but I listened to him. And to this day now, he's 19 now, and he talks to me all the time.
Wow.
And about things that, and I can ask him things and he will talk to me about them, or he'll just come up and talk to me. He was a football player, and he had a incident at a high school football game this year. And we probably had the deepest talk we've ever had coming home from that game.
Wow.
And he just let it all out. I mean, all of it out. And I was, was very proud of him for sharing. And our relationship has grown even closer since then. So I would say, the parents out there is listening is to your children when they are young, when they were very young, will go a long way later on for them talking to you when things aren't very easy to talk about. And I think that's the most important thing that I can say to that question.
It's a huge nugget of wisdom. And that conversation you had with your son, I mean, that's a sacred and holy time that makes our life so meaningful and rich, isn't it, Dr. Shelton?
Absolutely. I've never had a deeper conversation with very many people, actually, ever, because he spoke. Here's at the time 18-year-old kid, basically pouring his heart out about stuff that's going on at school and in the team, which is, as all of us know, in football is as Matthew will tell you, very macho atmosphere where you don't show emotion, except for anger and maybe joy when you're scoring. But he broke it all down to me, which I had no idea that was going on, no idea. And so we had to fix a few things. As Mark said, that's where the communication comes in with his coach. I had to have a conversation with his coach and say, listen, this kid's about ready to explode on somebody, and I can tell you who it is, and I can tell you why. And if you don't fix it within your team, he's not responsible, and I'm not responsible for his actions at that point, because he is going to explode. So going back, and Mark, I will say this, Mark had me read Jack Canfield's book, The Success Principles. And I'm sure a lot of you are probably familiar with it. And he had me read that with my older son, who we were not communicating very well at the time. The first chapter, I'm going to tell you, the communication did not go well at all. I thought it was over. I thought, well, that's it. We're done. He's not going to want to talk to me. Not going to read this book. 3 days later, he said, "Dad, have you read chapter 2 yet?" And he went on to read the book. Well, this is a child that's not a big reader. He went on and read that whole thing and wanted to talk about each chapter. And so, and Mark has told that to other dads and things also that I know. And that has really helped open up communication lines.
Oh, I love that, Dr. Shelton. Wow, that's great. Great wisdom for all of us, and yeah, listening from a very young age. And I just applaud you so much for stepping in and talking to that coach, because that's one of the issues I see with a lot of parents in athletics is that they have a hands-off approach and coach knows best, or the coach is really intimidating, or the child doesn't want you to talk to the coach. And sometimes you have to do that. And I just applaud you for taking that step. I think that's really important.
Thank you. And, but I got that, got that information, that confidence from Mark, actually. But you do have to, it's a time and a place.
Mhm,
Not after a game, not when all emotions are high.
mhm.
Be respectful of his time and what he has to do also, or he or she.
Right?
Um, and, because we don't want to forget about female students and athletes also, because they have very similar issues and sometimes deeper issues that go on within some of these coaches and teams also. So, but yes, thank you. And I just wanted to say that, you do have to pick your time and place,
Yeah.
and still be respectful, but still get your point across.
And what was the name of Jack Canfield's book for the people?
Success principles.
Success Principles. Yeah, that's excellent. I love that strategy that Mark gave you to communicate better with your son, and that was a real win. And speaking of athletics, I know, Matt, you've been very involved in athletics along the way as an attorney, and been involved in the National Football League. And you are also the father of 2 children, one of which is playing football at the college level. How would you weigh in on some of this professionally as well as personally as a parent?
Sure. I think one of the things that's most important that we kind of take for granted is we think our children are kind of everything's going to be okay. Like you never really think that things are going to reach a certain level. And with my son 6'2", he looks like the kid. He's mixed. He looks like the kid from High School Musical, Corbin Bleu, and he's going about his business, and you just think everything's going to be okay. Um, and what happened in my situation is when the message at home started to diverge from what the coaches were telling him inside the locker room. What acceptable behavior, I believe, and I came from football. I was 20 years in football, so I know what an NFL locker room looks like. I know what that's supposed to be, and what coaching is supposed to be, and what good coaching and strong coaching and hard coaching is supposed to be. But kids these days, it's my belief, you can coach our children hard, but you can't say something to at least my child that's kind of, there's no other way to say it, but slick or out of the side of your mouth, as we used to say. And at that point, those kids don't react to that well. And my son didn't react to it well. He doesn't react well to name calling. He doesn't react well to the coaches name calling other players.
Mhm.
And for a while where you thought everything was okay, when the messages diverged, my son really got upset about it and really got somewhat depressed about it.
Wow.
And that's really what led me to Mark in opening up discussions. And you have to understand, like, I've raised my son since he was 4. Like, I was the primary custodial parent. So he'd see his mom over the summertime, some holidays, but it was me raising. So I had the ability to communicate with him early on and establish a real open line of communication. But sometimes when that message is getting skewed by some outside source, you really need to hunker down and figure out, are you communicating it with your child the right way? And do I need to bring somebody else in to help me communicate with my child the right way, and to communicate and give him someone else to talk to that he feels good about going to? And it was imperative. I mean, without Mark in the college, in the Varsity Connects, my son would have really probably still been struggling with some of the issues that he dealt with his team and with his coaches, and that were kind of outside the box when it came to a lot of things. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Matt, I imagine as a parent that must bring up such helplessness, because you see there's a problem and you're not quite sure what to do. But what a great strategy that you enlisted Mark and his course to help with some of that. And it sounds like it really paid off.
It did. And it's a horrible feeling, especially knowing that you've been communicating with a child for this long and then going to a place where the message that you're trying to get to them just isn't ringing home anymore. So it's not that the message is going to change. It's just your approach and the way you go about getting that message through to your child has to change so they can hear it in a different way and be prepared to hear it. You know, and I think that's one of the things that when you're trying to raise a thoughtful child where they contemplate and really think about issues. And when you're raising that child, a lot of time it's confusing when these mixed messages come into play, especially when it's from people of authority and they just really don't know what to do with it and how to handle it. So it was imperative to bring Mark in, kind of reset the table for that, and just watch him flourish from those conversations.
So rewarding to watch that. And you just dropped your child off at college to play college football. Is that correct?
I did at Eastern Kentucky. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, wow. And how did that feel to you?
It was horrible. Honestly, it was. I mean, yeah, I've done it. It was horrible because it's been me and him since he was 4, and so I mean, just daily. It's just been. So I don't know any other way or any other way to do it or how to function. I mean, so dropping him off wasn't as bad as a car ride home. And getting back to the house and looking around and being like, I got to get a dog. I got to buy a dog. I got to do something
Yeah.
to take up that loss almost.
I
So
feel you on that. Yeah, there's some real grief when your child is doing well, but they also are individuating from you. And that is hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
it is, and I think you have to acknowledge that it's part of his growth process as well as your growth process, right? So you're growing as well, and you have to allow him to grow. You can't smother your child. You can't, as much as you'd like to, and as much as you miss that comfort of having him around, the smothering of that child is doing nothing but pushing him away. So we're still in contact almost every day. We still talk about football, about girls, about those things, but I'm trying to give him that space to grow, and I think I needed that space to grow as well. So.
Sure. Wow, that really makes so much sense, Matt. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I have a question from one of our viewers tonight, wondering about when you get repercussions or pushback from your athletic child because you went to the coach and they didn't want you to. So I'm just going to open it up to the panel. If any one of the three of you has a thought, how do you handle that? Our viewer wants to know.
I'll tell you, my son was, at times, what was going on was inherently unfair. So he knew that. I can tell you that they went down to a tournament where the coach said, we don't want any parents there. This is a getaway for our kids. This is that. We don't want the parents there. And I just don't believe in that, to be honest with you. So if I want to go see my son play, I go see him play. So for an example, I went to go see him play. The coaches were upset. I ended up leaving the scrimmages and things like that. And I talked to my son about it later. I'm like, listen, I'm sorry, but I wanted to see you play. And what he told me was, you know how many kids would love to have their dad come see them play?
Wow.
You know, how many dads don't come see their kids play? So he took it as though, you know, you've always been there. Like, why is it going to change now? So, and I don't know, maybe Mark or somebody had different experiences.
In my example, I guess it was mine that happened, and I talked, and during our conversation, I asked him, I said, you know, would you like me to go talk to the coach? And he wasn't like enthusiastic about it, but he understood. And when you do talk to the coaches, the way I did it first was very, you know, kind of eased him into it. I was complimentary of them because my son really did look up to these coaches because they spend sometimes more, he was spending more time, especially in football in Georgia. Your kids spending more time with the coaches than they are with you. Right. During the summer months and through spring and summer and fall, they're spending a whole lot more time, and they have a big influence on that kid's life and their whole psyche. And that's what I had to explain to him, is how much my son really hung on, all the boys hung on to his words. And what had happened was he had said something in the heat of the moment that was inappropriate to him, and the whole team heard it, and it was and he apologized, and he said, I'll apologize to your son also, because he knew he was wrong with what he said. but I didn't just come out and just jump on him. You know, I didn't come out and just start screaming at him and yelling, hey, you wait, da, da, da. No, it was, hey, look, this is a kid that really appreciates you. You know, he wants to play for you, he wants to do well, but that really hurt him. And these other things are going on that we just found out. And the coach didn't know some of the stuff that was going on, and he did correct it. And I saw the question in the chat, and to is it Sumit? I think it's named. There was no retribution. There actually, you know, there was a new respect, I would say, because all of a sudden, it was those comments didn't happen anymore. Practices were better, games were better, so you know, it's the way you say things to anybody, it's how you approach them. You know, I'm like Matt. I'm going to go to if I can go to his games, I'm going to go to his games. He only plays high school football one time, you know, for whatever, and I'm going to go watch him. Just like my older son, when he had soccer games, I was all over the country, you know, watching him play soccer, you know, because that's my son. And I want to watch him play. And I want to make sure he knows that dad is always here, because these coaches are going to be gone in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is. But dad's always going to be here. And they have to know that. And so I want them to do the same with their sons. I don't want them to be the stereotypical, you know, what we see as a Black father that, you know, is not involved in their kids' lives. They have to learn that, no, you're involved in their lives, and you love them, and you want to make sure you're there for them, just like Matt just said. You know, plenty of those kids wanted their dads there. Matt's just the one that took the initiative and went, you know, and obviously his son truly appreciated it.
I think too many parents underestimate the value of their loving and steadfast presence.
Yes.
It's not always about the words, right? It's about presence and showing up for them. And, you know, you bring up such a good point, which is how you communicated with the coach really helped it go smoothly. And the thing about parenting, and Mark, I'd love for you to jump in, but there are going to be times when our kids are not going to like what we do, agree with what we do, and they're going to be mad at us. And our job as parents is to hold to what we think is right. We can listen to them, but we have to tolerate that discomfort and that anger sometimes.
Right. And we have to give them the boundaries, right? And help them understand what the boundaries are and what we stand for. And, you know, at the same time, like Rick was saying, and Matt, you know, there's an opportunity to show your child how much you really support them, right? This is an issue big enough where I need to step in. You know, our situation was a little bit different. You know, I felt like it was a matter of life and death, because I didn't know what my son was going to do, you know, in an apartment by himself while the team is traveling and he's depressed. So I called his coach, and I told him I called the coach, and I said, here's why. And I gave him the explanation. And then when we were done, because the coach had a no call me rule. His hockey coach in college, you can't call me, especially about playing time or anything. If you're calling, you know, just to see how, you know, X, Y, and Z is doing, fine. But he didn't want to have interaction with the parents. So I called him and I said, look, my son needs help, and I need you to get it to him immediately. And if you can't, then I'll call your boss. And if your boss can't, then I'll be on a plane tonight up to Maine, and then I'll bring him back home and he can get help with me. I can get him the help and make sure he has it. But it's an opportunity for us to show our children how much we care about them, how much we support them, and the fact that we have, you know, 40, 45, 50 years, whatever it is, of experience walking around on this earth, and we do know what's best. You know, we're not going to lead you astray. Right?
A lot of the time. A lot of the time,
right? Most of the time, you know. And so you know, as parents, you know, you want to be popular with your, but at the same time, our job is to parent, right? It's to establish an understanding, and the key to communication is understanding, right? And we're not here to be friends with you. Right? I'm not going to ride around with you and your friends in the car on Friday night doing what you do. That's my job, is to make sure you're home safely. right? So you be home at 11:30. I don't care that everybody else's curfew is 1. Here's why yours is at 11:30, right? And we can have that conversation. But once you open up the dialogue and have them understand why, right? Now you have mutual respect and mutual understanding. And look, half of all parents struggle communicating with their kids, right? So just every other parent, if you look around the room, every other parent is struggling to have a conversation with their kids. 40% of parents say they talk to their kids 10 minutes or less per day.
That's so sad.
It's frightening.
It's frightening.
So that means somebody else is filling that space as an influence in their lives, right? Whether it's media. I mean, look at what we have as consumption for media, right? We have reality TV, we have social. There is a television show on right now called Murder Under the Friday Night Lights.
Wow.
Right? It's just about high school football, scenarios where someone was murdered. Right. So this kind of programming is obviously aimed at our children. That's if they're even watching YouTube TV or basic cable. Right. A lot of times they can see the things that they like and want to absorb on YouTube. And that's why you have to be involved. Right. And that's why you have to establish that level of understanding, because the kids don't have any context. Right. You think about what they have access to on their phone. Pornography, sex. They don't have context to understand what they're seeing, right? So a parent has to be involved to say, hey, let's have this conversation. Let's have the sex talk, because we got to have it earlier.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And the other thing that Matt was talking about, which struck a chord with me, because I know it was a difficult part for both my kids, is that transition, those transition periods of what you have to be careful for, from junior high to high school, from high school to college, from college into adulthood. Remember, we're parenting much longer now.
Yes.
Right? You're going to have 25 and 26-year-olds in your home.
It's so true.
Because they simply can't afford to be on their own, right? Some didn't have a plan, right? But the way society and our economy is panning out right now, a lot of kids have to come home after college. Think about the frustration that brings with it, right? Or if your child is not arriving when you think he should arrive, right? You want to offer support as opposed to saying, what are you doing sitting around here? That I did that. I said that to my son before he went to the Navy, because I was going to work at 3:00 in the morning. I was working the morning show, and I saw him sitting across the street at the clubhouse. And then he pulled into the driveway after I left, after hanging out till 2, 3:00 in the morning. And so I said, either you get yourself together or you get out of here. And so he left. And he went to my parents' house, where there was, much less of a battle to do the things that he wanted to do.
Yeah.
So, we have to, I needed to be more supportive in that regard, right? And in that space, and understanding he's home, he just spent 5 years on his own. Now I have to understand the space he's in now, right? What are they going through now? What's this really about? How do you feel? Those are questions we need to consider when we're in these spaces that are new to us, right? Like when we got out of college, we went and got a job, and then we started being adults, and then we had a family, and it's not working like that anymore. It's very, very different. And kids' pursuits. Your child might come home one day and say, I'm going to be an influencer.
Yeah.
Right. And you're saying, what is that? Yeah. Right. And so now you have to understand what an influencer is. So you can have the conversation and offer support, offer the pros and cons. Do you want to get into accounting? We can have that conversation. There are going to be a lot of good jobs out there for you. But if I don't know what an influencer does, if I'm not connected to the things that my child enjoys, how can I offer support? So that's where we got to start, is with that common ground and that understanding, that mutual understanding and mutual respect.
Yes. And meeting your child where they are, not where you are.
Yes. And not where you want them to be.
Yes, that's it, Mark.
not where you want them to be,
That's it.
right?
Yeah, it's a hard job. I mean, it is the most fulfilling, rewarding job we'll ever do, but it is the most difficult task we will ever take on. And
Oh,
there's just a myriad of emotions, right? And responsibilities.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of times, we're guilty as parents of providing, right?
Yeah.
Because it's so important to provide. We want to keep up with the Joneses. We want to take nice trips, but sometimes they just need us.
Yes.
Sometimes they just need us. And it was never more vivid to me than my son's first Christmas in prison. We'd gone to see him, and we had taken his oldest son with us. Cody must have been about four at the time. And it was time to leave. And he said, "Daddy, come on, we got to go. Visitation is over." And my son had to try to sit there and explain to him why he couldn't leave. And it was like I cried 3 hours all the way back home. And but it reminded me just how much they need us, right? It's just us being there, us being present, us having the ability to interact with them, on their terms sometimes, right? Because sometimes they're in the, everything's a 5-alarm fire for kids these days, right? So it's got to be a 5-alarm fire for us, right? And we need to treat it as such. Or they need to believe that we believe it's a 5-alarm fire too.
To align with them. Yes. And you made such a good point, Mark, and I didn't want to skip over this piece that you said. I wanted to highlight it. And that is showing interest in what they're interested in. So if they're interested in gaming and you don't like gaming, it's going to go a long way for you to sit there and learn how to game with them, for you to participate in their world sometimes, even if you really don't have an organic interest in it. And I thought that was such a good piece to highlight.
Yeah, because again, things have changed, right? And our society is, crypto is a big thing that my youngest is into, right? And so, in order to have really good conversations with him, I'll call him and we'll jump on the computer and he'll explain to me, what he's looking at, what he's following. And it gives him a sense of confidence about, what he likes and what he enjoys. And it lets him know that I'm interested in what he's doing and what he finds interesting.
I love
Right.
that.
And I don't know anything about crypto. I just know what he tells me. Right. And he's doing well at it and he enjoys it, but it helps us form a deeper, more emotional connection.
That's
And
so valuable.
and it keeps us there. And, and while it sounds easy, it takes practice. We can all become super communicators if we're willing to do the work, right? It's just a matter of doing the work, having the patience, staying the course, setting goals. It's just like we would pursue, our professional joys and career goals, right? If we put the same emphasis on our family and communication as we did on our career and our career goals and our financial, concerns, we'd be a better society, better off society, because we'd be much more balanced.
Yes. So agreed, Mark. Great point. And I know we just have a few minutes left, but I don't want to miss this question in the chat, and then I will turn it over to April as we close. But we do have a question in the chat. What are some of the additional challenges that African-American communities have that other races don't have or maybe don't understand? If anybody on the panel wants to take that question before we close, I just want to make sure we got it answered.
Yeah, I'll jump in right quick. And I would say one of the things that happens oftentimes in African-American households is that you'll have generations there, right? And you will have, one particular wage earner caring for a couple different generations. There may be an aunt, an uncle, a grandmother, all in the same place, right? With the pressures on one, particular wage earner, right? And so everything is kind of compounded. And then, when you have generational differences, those kinds of, different ideas and values come into play when you're trying to help understand what your child is going through. You know, my mom can't relate to social media and what's going on, you know. So when we talk to my grandson about what's happening at school, you know, she's kind of out in left field on it because she doesn't really understand, you know, that at 10 years old, kids are texting and are on social media and are watching YouTube for hours at a time. So, you know, that there are big cultural differences and divides. You know, the other thing is the conversation about how to deal with law enforcement. You know, I had a blowout with my son coming through the airport, you know, with a hoodie on. And I'm like, why are you coming through the airport with a hoodie on? You know, in this day and age, you have to be careful about how you present yourself at each and every turn. You don't want to look suspicious, right? Don't draw attention to yourself. You know, and if you've never had to have that, because I get a lot of whys, right? When I was having that conversation, but why? But why? I got my hockey bag. No, you're 6'2" and you're coming through the airport and people, all they see is a dark figure with a hoodie on, right? And a weapon in his hand with a hockey stick. So you have to be careful and cognizant of where you are, how you speak to law enforcement, and how you present yourself. And
I think,
go ahead.
and I think that's important, Mark, what you're saying, only because even the conversations that you talk about with the coaches and with coaching staffs and with just other adults, I think if your kids can actually put the phone down and actually observe how you're going about it and observe how you move through the airport, observe how I act when I get pulled over at a traffic stop with my two hands on the steering wheel, roll the windows down, and turn off the radio and the ignition. I mean, it's so many times that kids really aren't paying attention to what we're doing as adults because they're looking at a video screen. So even those conversations, because I thought it's fascinating, the whole coaches conversation. When I had that issue with the coach, I had to go talk to the coach. I was like, I brought my son with me so he would see how this is how you attack these problems. These are how you deal with these issues. This is how you go about talking to your coaches and your coaching staff. And I think a lot of parents don't involve their kids in some of those conversations that they need to actually see it. Black parents, white parents, I think we all need to involve our kids more in some of those conversations. And you'll find out, and I'm sorry, but this kind of hits a little bit of nerve with me with these coaches, because I've hired and fired coaches way beyond the high school coach. So when a high school coach tells a parent, you can't talk to me about something, that is a stupid rule. It's based in ego, and you should never pay attention to it.
Yeah.
That is your child. And you can ask that coach whatever that question is and bring it to his attention. Now, like Richard said, bring it to his attention. Hey, what can my son do to get better? What can he do to improve? How can he go about this or whatever it is? But you always have access to those coaches. That's just ego based. So those parents, I saw the question come up, talk to those coaches, bring your son or daughter involved and involve them and teach them how to do that. Because that's something that I think, even in the Black community, that I think we really need to take advantage of. When we have those, the grandparents or whoever, the extended family in the household, there's so much to be learned from a 90-year-old grandmother that lived through the Depression, that's lived through, so many different life experiences. All those conversations to sit as a child or a young adult to have those conversations that are plentiful within the Black community, I think we need to take more advantage of when it comes to them.
Yes, great point, Matt. Dr. Shelton, did you want to weigh in before we close this topic? And I'll toss it to April.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, I'm going to reiterate what Matthew said. That was not the only conversation I had with my son's coach. I had one the year before, and he was with me. And I think it is important, not just in sports. I saw there's something, somebody said something also about performing arts and about whatever your child is into, computers, wherever they, have to support, as Mark said, you're with them, but also support them. And if they're having a problem with the teacher, if it's in school, I know there's some teachers on here. If there's a teacher that they're having a problem with, there's no difference between a teacher and a coach. And they do the same thing and they spend the same number of hours with your child. and they have the same authority over them. It's grades instead of playing time. So don't think that you are, especially as African American parents, we have to be involved in their schoolwork in the schools with them, or they will not get what they are entitled to. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. We don't like it. Nobody likes it, but that is the truth. And if you're not involved, then your kids are not going to be involved, and you're going to have some issues that they probably should not have.
And the African American community needs to reach out to people like Mark and his Varsity Connects to really understand there's help out there when you lack the ability to communicate with your child, or you hit a bump in the road where you really need somebody to push that communication forward. It's important you go find someone like Mark in his program to really help you get through those hurdles, because the downside is that there's horrific downside if you don't have the ability to communicate with your child.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any last words, Mark, before April closes it out for tonight?
No, I just want to say, remember, your kids are watching, even when we think they're not, oftentimes they are watching. So when you have an opportunity to model a good conversation, and to really engage with your child, don't just be there, be present, be in the moment with them. And it will pay dividends for you down the road. Like I said, we're parenting much longer, and and it's not getting any easier. So we've got to change the tools in the toolbox as technology continues to grow on us, and keep up with what's happening in the world around us and get out of our own bubble.
I love that, Mark. Absolutely. Well, it has been such an engaging, enlightening conversation. Thank you, panel, for all of the nuggets of wisdom that you shared, all of the insights that we've gleaned from tonight. And April, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Wow, this really is one of my favorite isn't the best word, but this is really one of the most important topics and speaker series that we've had. It's really close to my heart, and of course, because I'm a parent. But first, Angela, thank you so much. The moderation, it was so beautiful. Thank you so much. Mark, Rick, and Matt, thank you so much. This discussion is close to my heart because it's important, number one, that now that our children are grown, that we can communicate more effectively with our grandchildren. That I have a granddaughter, and now I understand better the pitfalls and the mistakes. So it's important from that perspective, but I can see in retrospect, and I think I have good kids. I think I've had successful children, but I see the mistakes that I've made with regard to communication. And I think that for a while, I was a single parent. When my kids were small, I was a single parent. And I thought that I did well communicating, but I can see where I didn't communicate as effectively as I could have because of the distractions. And a single parent, my concern was to make sure that they had food on the table, a roof over their head, and, what they needed for school. And then, the communication was a kind of a side thing. I hear you, but I got to go to work. I got to make sure you have food, make sure you're not hungry. You have that was it. But, and I'm a communicator. I thought that I was communicating. And when you say that, I think it was you, Rick. I think when you're talking to it's you, Mark. When you think you're listening, but you're not actively listening, and it's because you want to put your child on the same level as you, and you think they know what you know, and you anticipate what they're going to say or how they're going to respond, and they're not. They don't. So active listening is very, very important. Yeah. That's one thing that if I had a do-over, I would do over. I would listen actively and not anticipate that they think like me, will respond like me, because they're not me. Although I think, you know, they should be little mini me, but they're not. They're individuals with different personalities and experiences. So that would be my do-over. I'll do it over with my granddaughter. But this is very, very, very good conversation. I'm going to get that book, The Success Principle. I haven't read that, but I want to get that. I took some notes. You know what I think, Mark, is really important too? A village. I think it's important to have a village for your children, because we do, as parents, miss things. We miss things. And, you know, if you have a village with godparents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and close friends, if your child feels like they can't, or for whatever reason, communicate with you, then the village is there. And I think in the Black community, that's really strong, and that's really important. Yeah, I think that was a really good thing for my family, the village. But I don't want to redo the whole series. I just wanted to say that it's something that I hope we can revisit again. It's close to my heart. And I'm also a parent of, that's my last point, of a football player. And guys, read my lips. I wish a coach would tell me that I can't see my son.
Right?
I wish they would tell me that. Oh no. What? And I'm not going to ask my son, can I talk to your coach? My son knows I'm going to talk to the coach. And oh yeah. So I just give the coach a look. What? and I don't have to do a lot of talking, but yeah, my son, really, your point was that they spend more time with the coaches and they look up to them. They're mentors to the children. And yeah, so I need to know that it's right, that it's good, that you're on an up and up, and that it's, you know, so yeah, no, I've talked to the coaches. Now my son, his coach is actually going to marry him. That's how close and how tight the relationship is between the players and the coaches. Yeah. So yeah, no, that was another point. No, I was there. And I was there at scrimmages, at games, since junior high school. Everyone. And I'm going to be there. And I'm going to call you if I feel like there's something that I need to talk about. We're going to talk. And you will not tell me I can't talk to you. Not this one. But anyway. But thank you so much for this conversation. It's so good. It's something that, you know, I hope we revisit. A lot of parents need to understand that communication is not just talking, it's listening, active listening. And we can still do it. We can still, although our children are grown, we can still learn. We can still get there, because it is a different time. They still need us. They need us more now than ever, our adult children. And so we can still get it right. Start to build that foundation now, even if we didn't get it right when they were younger. We can start now. Hopefully, prayerfully, they're open to it. But we can find ways to communicate with our children because they need us. And so with that, I will end it. Thank you so much. It was so good to be here and see you guys. Look out for our next speaker series. It'll be in the email, on social media. And if all hearts and minds are clear, have a good night, a wonderful night. And thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, April.
Thank you. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.